Welcome back to Education Through Music, the podcast. As always, I'm your host, Noah, and this is part one of a two-part episode exploring best practices for preparing student performances. Winter concert season is wrapping up for a lot of us, making this the perfect time to reflect on how things went. Joining me for a little roundtable discussion about their concerts are three music teachers who teach in schools that vary widely in New York City. We'll discuss their inspirations, their observations, and whatever common threads we can find to try and answer the question, what makes for an excellent school concert? As a special treat, we'll intersperse with chunks of our conversation some audio from the very performances we'll be discussing. Alfredo, whom you've met before if you listened to episode 1 of the show, is in his second year teaching modern band at a Catholic school in the South Bronx. Alfredo, how are you?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Thanks for being here. Marta teaches elementary school general music and band in the South Bronx. It's her first year in New York with ETM. Marta, good to see you. Thanks for being here.
You as well. Thanks for having me.
And finally, Joe teaches general music at a new middle school in Queens. It's his first year teaching as well. And Joe, welcome. Good to see you.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
All right, everybody. So this first question, I've heard from Alfredo on this in episode 1 of the show. You are our first two-time guest, so
thank you.
that honor belongs to you. But awesome. Everybody else, we can get into this question of how did you get involved first in music, but then in teaching music? These are two different things, but both backstories are interesting, I think. So Marta, why don't you jump off there?
Sure. So I don't come from a musical family or anything, but I started playing piano when I was 6 years old, and that kind of started my musical journey. And I think that I was just so inspired by the music I heard on the radio and on TV and in TV shows that I just really wanted to be able to play that music. So I asked for piano lessons. I was fortunate enough that my family bought a cheap keyboard from Guitar Center and took it from there. Then I joined band in 4th grade, started playing clarinet, and that ended up being the instrument that I studied all through high school and college. And I got into music teaching because I knew that I always wanted to be a teacher because I enjoyed helping people. And I really wanted to be able to be a part of that journey and help others. And I saw how much joy music brought to people, and I just wanted to be able to bring that to people throughout my career.
Nice. Joe, what about you?
So in the 6th grade, my mom actually introduced me to The Who, and I kind of became a little obsessed with Keith Moon and his insane lifestyle and just his insane way of playing the drums. And I just listened to their most popular song over and over and over again, Baba O'Reilly. And my mom was like, hey, why don't you listen to another song? And so then I just started listening to all their albums, and I just became more and more into this band. And then I got my first drum set when I was 11 for Christmas, the classic Guitar Center used purchase thing. And so I just kind of went self-taught and was just mimicry, just like watching my favorite drummers and just trying to be like them. Keith Moon, John Bonham, Danny Carey from Tool, all these like crazy drum bands. And basically I was in a cover band with my best buddies throughout middle school and first year of high school before I had to move. and we just kind of covered our favorite bands like Led Zeppelin, The Doors. My brother was the singer. He had the worst voice, but he had the spirit. and yeah, I just like, we moved after freshman year. I finished at another high school, and that's where I joined band. That's where I joined jazz band. It was a smaller school where I had more of a chance to kind of like actually get involved. Because beforehand, it was just kind of like, I wasn't the greatest student. Early high school, middle school, just kind of like went to school because I just wanted to play drums when I got home. But yeah, and then, you know, when you're a senior, they kind of ask you, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? It's like, I guess I want to play drums. And so I just kind of stuck with it.
Nice. Yeah, and now in teaching, you're providing that opportunity to other students who, you know, might not be enjoying all that much of the school experience, but they get to go to school and play drums.
Yep, stick to my strengths.
We're talking about your histories as musicians, and your the sort of like origin story here. So what's a great concert that you've been to, that you've seen?
Oh man.
Yeah, that's a good one.
You mean like something that was super influential when we were young, or something could be even recent, or...
I think, yeah, any of that counts, because the follow-up question to give away the next stage is like, how did that experience of being an audience member influence the way that you're thinking about the experiences that you're trying to offer your audience members, who are, you know, parents of students?
Right.
Yeah, I think I don't know, because I spoke about this in the first episode, how like I wasn't introduced to like jazz and stuff or like classical music in my household because they just didn't listen to it. So a lot of the shows I went to as a teenager were like rock shows, and that's the crowd that I'm more used to. So like even in college, when you're like tasked with going to see a couple concerts during the semester, it was hard for me to get into it, right? Because the crowd, like, it doesn't have the same energy as the thing, even though you could appreciate the music.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think like the more influential shows are like the ones that are way more physically engaging, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm big into like reggae, so like I saw a band out of Hawaii that I've never heard of. I've never heard their music. I knew of them, and I didn't know any of their songs. And they're to this day, I think they're the best like performing band that ever came on, because like they like alluded to so many other like songs within their set. I'm like, oh, this is awesome, like, and so much energy. So I think that's what influences me when I go to shows. Like if the energy is gonna be nice, like I could deal with it. But it's like I could still like going to a classical show will still like I have to adjust. There's definitely an adjustment that I have to do. But I don't know if you feel the same, because you got into jazz like later on, right? So like,
yeah, I got into jazz later on, like in sort of high school, but I never even really took a deep dive into jazz until I was in music school, studying classical percussion. Yeah. You know, yeah. For me, anytime I leave a show, I'm just like, God, why don't I practice more? You know? So it's like, it's a super like inspirational experience for me. Ideally, when we put on shows at school, it'd be nice to you know, give that kind of vibe to the parents and say, oh, I'm inspired for my kid to be inspired by this. I think that would be really cool. For me, a concert, one of my favorite bands, not really a lot of people know about them because they don't get around too much, but they're called the Deer Hunter, Dear Hunter. They're kind of a play on words. A lot of their songs are play on words. It was one of the only concerts I ever went to alone, 2014 at Gramercy Theater here in New York City. And I felt a little weird about going alone. I was actually on my way there with a buddy, and he was just like, you know what, you do this one alone. And I'm like, okay. So I go in there, and it was actually the best concert experience I've ever had. I knew all the words. I was just like stoked. And you could tell the band was stoked too, because they walked out to like cheering fans, and I wanted to be them in that moment. But at the same time, I was happy to be in the audience being one of those cheering fans. And the singer-songwriter, he noticed me, pointed at me, you know, Senpai noticed me. He's just like, you right there. And I'm like, me right here, you got me. But yeah, and like every other concert I go to, I left that concert like, man, I need to do this more. And hopefully ideally, I could, have these kids leave the classroom thinking, I can't wait to do that again because I need to do this more.
Yeah.
So that's a goal.
Yeah, something to work towards.
Yeah.
That's a really pointed example of that connection with the performer. But I think the best shows, even if someone's not pointing to you directly, you still feel like you have this connection with the artist. Like you go into a performance space, whether it's a basement somewhere or Gramercy Theater, and you feel like you've communed with the band, like you were there and they were there and you were sort of together. And I haven't thought about that in the context of like students performing, because but that's something that happens, isn't it? Like kids walk on stage and second graders, third graders. I saw this at Marta's show. Like they're waving to their parents. They're communing with their audience, and the parents leave. They might not be starstruck because like they live with the kid, but but there's still that experience of sort of being there and being present with each other. And speaking of Marta's concert, I have a couple of clips to share from what was actually two concerts in the same day. One was for the lower grades and one was for the upper grades. And they divided the concert into these two sections so that they could fit the massive audience that was there for each section into an auditorium where space was limited. So without any further ado, here is a little sample of Marta's concert.
Okay, excellent job, first graders. The final song of this section of the performance, before we move on to the older grade levels, is going to be called, what is it called?
Mittens and Gloves!
Mittens and Gloves, which reminds us to dress warmly in the cold weather and to not forget our mittens and gloves. Ready?
Yes.
Everything prep?
Mittens and gloves, gloves and mittens, soft and warm, just like picking down. My fingers nice and soft, cozy as a big bear heart. I will not forget them when it's really chilly and will be too freezing. That would just be silly. Mittens and gloves, gloves and mittens, soft and warm, just like kitten down. My fingers nice and soft, cozy as a big bear heart. Mittens and gloves.
Please join me in welcoming our third grade class. They have two songs for you. Our first song is called El Invierno, and it talks about the winter time.
Yes. Ya viene el invierno con frío y con hielo, muy pronto caerá mucha nieve en el cielo. Ya viene el invierno con frío y con hielo, muy pronto caerá mucha nieve en el cielo. Cantar, cantar, que me enredo yo. Cantar, cantar, que me enredo yo. Ya viene el invierno con frío y con hielo, muy pronto caerá mucha nieve en el cielo. Cantar.
And now back to our conversation about performances that we've seen, that we've been inspired by.
I guess the show for me, it's so hard to choose, but This was kind of a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I saw Elton John at Madison Square Garden last February, but it was his last performance ever at Madison Square Garden. So the energy was just through the roof. It was very emotional for everybody who was there. And, performances like that, you kind of just are surrounded by so many people who have been so inspired and touched by the same artist. And even though, Elton John doesn't know who any of us are, we all, bond over his music and enjoy it so much. What I enjoyed about that particular performance is that he shared so many anecdotes in between songs about his time in New York City, about kind of reflecting over his career. And I thought that was really unique. And drawing from that into a school concert setting, I think it's always beneficial to keep the audience on their toes. Don't be afraid to talk a little bit in between songs and kind of bond with the audience a little bit over the music that's being performed.
Yeah, good stage banter it's really hard. You can't just like go out and do it. You really have to kind of prepare. I don't know. I'm speaking from experience. I can't really do anything without preparing for it. But when people do it well, it's such a good skill and a good part of the experience.
Yeah, it's I don't know if you got to see my show, but it's
yeah,
weird to rehearse that, but like it's definitely something I noted to the kids that because I teach high school, so when the band was transitioning to different players, right? Like the bass player was switching off. I'm like, kill time by talking to the audience, and like it was a weird thing to rehearse, but it's something that I drilled enough that like they knew to be ready for it, and they were able to make those like crowd connections in person, and some of them did it really well. I'm like, oh great, like you're a natural. Like there was this one kid who sang on like a majority of the songs. So he swapped out maybe twice, but when he came back on, he's like, "Oh, it's nice to see you guys again. I haven't seen you guys," and it was just so natural. I'm like, "This is great," but it definitely does add an element to that. Because again, like it gets around that stiffness of like you have parents just sitting and they're not really standing and engaging, but it's definitely something to look into.
Yeah, there's a lot of dead silence in elementary school, or actually any type of concert where you have transitions like that, and knowing how to fill that space is definitely a skill that's required.
Yeah, you got to break that wall in between the stage and the audience any chance you get, especially during, those swapping times.
To give you a concrete example of what that stage banter to which Alfredo's referring sounds like, we've got a clip from his concert with a little bit of banter and then the finale of the show, which is a tune I suspect you'll recognize.
What's up, y'all? How's everybody doing? We good? All right, we good.
Think that was loud enough?
I don't know.
You think it can be louder?
That was a little whack. Come on!
Yeah. Check. There we go.
All right, let's get right into it then.
All right.
Feliz Navidad, Feliz Navidad, Feliz Navidad, próspero año y felicidad. Feliz Navidad, Feliz Navidad, Feliz Navidad, próspero año y felicidad. I wanna wish you a Merry Christmas. I wanna wish you a Merry Christmas. I wanna wish you a Merry Christmas from the bottom of my heart. I wanna wish you a Merry Christmas. I wanna wish you a Merry Christmas. I wanna wish you a Merry Christmas from the bottom of my heart. Feliz Navidad. Feliz Navidad. Come on, sing it, you know it. Feliz Navidad. Próspero año y felicidad. Feliz Navidad. Come on, we all Spanish in here, don't lie. Come on, get louder. Feliz Navidad, próspero año y felicidad. I wanna wish you a Merry Christmas. I wanna wish you a Merry Christmas. I wanna wish you a Merry Christmas from the bottom of my heart. I wanna wish you a Merry Christmas. I wanna wish you a Merry Christmas. I wanna wish you a Merry Christmas from the bottom of my heart. Feliz Navidad, Feliz Navidad, Feliz Navidad, próspero año y felicidad. Feliz Navidad.
at some point we're gonna share some best practices with the listener, and I think one of the best practices that I saw at Marta's concert, but that I see at every concert that I attend that isn't a school concert, but like maybe school concerts should be doing this as well, is having some house music to like, for not the genre house music, of course, but the, but I mean, I don't know, maybe in between performances when you're getting on the stage and off the stage, you got to have something going on. You got to have, if you don't have remarks by an administrator or by the teacher, which is totally fine, get someone to like play a little something on the piano, like Elijah did. Or have something, if you've got the PA set up, then have a playlist ready to go. Preferably one with like a paid account where you're not listening to ads at the start of the tune.
At my concert, Mr. and Mrs. Met showed up, so that was a good enough distraction. Right. Anytime there's some dead air, so...
Yeah, could you tell us a little bit more about that? Because you are in a very particular school with some connections that are really interesting.
Yeah, so it's the Tommy L. Agee Educational Facility or something like that. The important part of that is Tommy L. Agee. He played on the Mets, the 1969 Miracle Mets, when they won the World Series. So this is a brand new middle school. This is its first year. It's only 6th grade right now. So they named it after him. And that's the first thing I noticed when I got assigned to this school. I was like, oh, baseball. I love baseball. And I'm a Red Sox fan, but I don't hate the Mets, so this is awesome.
It's good that they're in separate divisions.
Right, yeah.
Separate leagues, rather.
Here I am, just a hop, skip, and a jump away from Citi Field. And so basically, our special guest at all these events is actually Tommy L. Agee's wife. He himself passed away, but his wife comes to all of our events. And so we have these particular connections with the Mets. So we were able to get Mr. and Mrs. Met to show up and totally interrupt in the middle of this concert. But it was a welcome interruption. Yeah, I mean, like the idea was that they would show up after the music, but things were running late as they do, so they just kind of rolled up, and I just hear a bunch of kids yelling, and I'm like, all right, we have 2 giant baseball people here, and just gonna walk around giving handshakes. One of them sat down, started playing a drum, and I'm just like, I'm just gonna roll with this, But yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, that's to see Mr. and Mrs. Met playing congas and everything else that they were doing.
Playing congas to these Spanish Christmas songs was just hilarious.
That's great.
That's awesome.
We've talked a little bit about transition music and good stage banter, which is something that you can bring from your experience as a performer. What are some other ways that your backgrounds in performance have influenced your concert? So not necessarily thinking about what you would want to see as an audience member, but thinking about what makes good shows as a performer.
What makes good? I always think about organization. Like, I feel like if my area is organized, like even in a rehearsal studio, when you go practice, and you have like the musician that like just throws their bag on the floor, and you have I'm the guy who like folds his jacket and puts it in the corner, and I try to do the same thing wherever the kids are performing or the way they walk on stage. So like when I used to teach elementary school, I drilled just walking up to the stage a bunch of times and how neat that would look. And like with these high school kids, like the transitions were quick because they drilled them too. Like, all right, who's playing next, and they would run up and like switch off quickly, and they'd help each other off. So like just being that organized, because I think I have this thing at shows, like if I feel like something's off, I disassociate really quickly. So like if I could tell the musician is like playing around with the monitor because he can't hear correctly enough, like it takes me out of it. So I try to avoid the same thing for like audience members of a show that I would put on. So I go over that checklist like dozens of times to make sure that everything's correct, and like before the show, like ETM bought me a bunch of cables that would just make the show so much easier. I got like 50-foot XLRs that help me be in a perfect spot to see the whole show. And that definitely helps, like just being organized. Yeah,
that's what I was going to say is that when I hear rehearsal space organized, show organized, and know that you're working with a modern band, I'm thinking like, oh, so that's some cable management.
Yeah, it's I've picked up a couple like tricks like so the school the kids need to do service hours because they're in high school. So like a bunch of them volunteer like, hey, could we basically like roadie for you for service hours? I'm like, it got approved, so yeah, come roadie. So I had a bunch of kids like laying cable and
Oh, that's
organizing.
awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome. So that was really good. But it's with those extra long cables, it's trying to teach kids to roll it up correctly. And you're just get a knot of wires, but no, definitely having the right amount of things is definitely useful. Like I had everything I needed. ETM helped with at the last second with a ton of cables. But definitely organization helped me to put on a good show.
Yeah, for our dress rehearsal, I think we spent about 2/3 of the time just practicing transitions.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine not having that time and just going into a concert without having practiced that, because it's so essential, especially with younger kids. And it really puts on a better performance when the transitions are smooth.
Yeah, I think an important skill that a lot of musicians learn, especially if they go to music school, specifically for performance, is how to make sure a show can happen in a very small amount of time and under very tense circumstances sometimes. In my case, I mean, I was just doing everything that I thought was the right move and kind of learning as I went what wasn't the right move and what worked. This is the first time I've had to do that. And I didn't really have everything I needed. And I kind of had to find out as I went what I needed. And even at the show, I still didn't have everything I needed. And there was like tech issues. And we had to last minute find a way to get our keyboard loud enough because we couldn't hook it up directly to the sound system. And so we just kind of put a microphone next to the speaker, and somehow it was loud enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, knowing how to put a show together in a very small amount of time was critical, because I think I had one actual real rehearsal, and the rest were lunch clubs, which is, they say it's a half-hour club, but by the time everyone gets in the room and sat down and wants to pay attention to you, you have maybe 15 minutes.
Right.
So yeah, knowing what to do in a very short amount of time and really trying to make it happen was a skill that I needed in particular, and I got better at it. So
another skill I want to add is being able to kind of manage your emotions and any anxiety or stage fright when performing, because that's something that a lot of students voiced to me before, is when I would ask if anyone has any questions, they all said, what do we do if we're nervous? What do we do if we don't want to perform? So for each class leading up to the concert, we kind of talked a little bit about, how you manage those feelings of anxiety, and that they're totally normal. They're okay to have, but there's some ways that we can go about that to help all students feel better on stage. And that was, as my experience as a performer, I've definitely felt those feelings before. Having experienced that helped me better prepare my students for the performance.
Everybody ends up having to figure out how to deal with that kind of stress, that kind of anxiety before a performance, and there are so many different ways of doing it. So some experience and also like knowing other musicians and hanging out with other musicians in groups that you're in, you end up learning a lot about how to deal with stress and anxiety and like fear, which definitely comes up in student performances, but it comes up in a lot of other spaces with like, developing people too. So like, I mean, music teachers, I think, make great all kinds of, life coaches. In
Public speaking.
Yeah. It's all, we have all these tricks that we have to come up with in order to do the thing that we love doing. So, and then, being able to share that with others is sort of, part of the gig.
Yeah, that's interesting, because it's so much harder for like younger kids, because you're doing 6 and you're doing elementary. Yeah, it's like I have an easier time because it's really just like it felt. I always relate it to a sports team, and like stereotypically that's like, oh, sports and like music are separate fields, but like at certain times I feel like a coach rather than a music teacher because I'm not playing the instruments for these guys, and I'm not directing them during the show. So before our show, like that big like nervous speech was like, hey guys, like worst case scenario, you guys mess up, just stick a finger. I'll say we're gonna retry that, and that's it. And I'm like, and that's a part of that crowd banter that they're gonna clap for you because you were engaged enough to say, you know what, we're gonna try that again. It's not the end of the world, and that helped a ton, you know. And you know, you have your more confident kids that help out the ones that are way more nervous. But that when they get to a level where they understand conversation like that, it's totally helpful to just be straight up with them. Like, look, if you mess up and like there's no recovering, just stop the song and restart, and they're gonna clap for you, I promise. And that definitely helped, you know. And like you could see it in them that they were way more comfortable afterwards. But and it's also like a Catholic school, so they did like a pre-show prayer, and they got over their like helping each other out like through their prayer was really helpful for them. But that was cool.
Yeah. I'm thinking about some of the other strategies that as a musician you might share with your student musicians, and the first one that comes to mind that you definitely shouldn't teach them, but would be totally authentic, would be like, this is how you blame the sound guy.
Take a shot in the
I was
green
the sound
room.
guy. I'm like, I'm the sound guy. No.
That sounds to me like as good a place as any to leave things for the moment. Be sure to join us next week for part 2 of the episode, in which we continue our conversation on the best practices we've picked up along the way, as well as come up with some advice for early career music teachers as they prepare to present their very first student performances.